Hi again then guys, and welcome to my fifth pick of a vehicle which I would love to see feature in a future GranTurismo game, be it GT Sport or GT7. And in this particular pick I'm discussing the 2003 concept car from Cadillac, the Cadillac 16, which is a luxury car. And this series, for any who are new to it, is narrowing down the 30 vehicles which I would love to see feature on GranTurismo above all others. Basically, the 30 vehicles which I would like to see the most. And some of these cars I would say have a reasonably good chance of being featured on GranTurismo, such as the Ferrari FF. Others, maybe not so much. Cars like the Trossi Monaco. Some have already been on the game, like the Renault Espace F1, and others, like the Cadillac today, have been on racing games, but not specifically on GranTurismo. Now, the Cadillac 16 has been featured on at least 4 racing games that I'm aware of. It was featured on Test Drive Unlimited, Project Gotham, Midnight Club, and Asphalt 8, which I've never actually played, but I believe it is featured on that game. And it's a very interesting car. It's a car which is usually pretty popular when it's featured on a game. It tends to be the ultimate vehicle of its type on any given game, that being, of course, a luxury car. And it's not difficult to see why. It's powered by a massive engine, by far the biggest engine of any modern luxury car, concept or otherwise, a 13.6 litre or well over 800 cubic inch V16, which is interestingly naturally aspirated, so no turbos, no superchargers, but despite that, it still puts out 1,000 horsepower and 1,000 foot-pounds of torque. Now that drives through the rear wheels, through a 4-speed automatic gearbox. And as with most luxury cars, although the engine has a very big spec on paper, it's not really designed to give you the kind of performance that a supercar with the equivalent spec would. So in other words, it's not designed to be a 200 mph machine, in a very similar way to vehicles like the Rolls-Royce Phantom, the Volkswagen Phaeton, the Maybach 6.2, etc. However, one interesting thing about the 16 is where it takes its influences from, and the kind of vehicle that it tries to be. Because back in the day, the gap between ultimate luxury cars and what you would consider to be normal cars was quite significant. Something like a Rolls-Royce or a Bentley was years ahead of any other car on the market in terms of quality, luxury, and value. Which is why we came to know the cliche of, it's the Rolls-Royce of such and such. It became that cliche because that car was so far ahead. Nowadays, though, that's not the case as much. Rolls-Royces are still, of course, luxury cars of the highest quality, but the difference in quality, luxury, spec, price, value between cars like Rolls-Royces or Maybachs or Bentleys to what would have back in the day been considered much lesser brands such as Volkswagen, Audi, Mercedes, BMW, etc. The gap is much smaller now. Those companies such as Volkswagen with the Phaeton, especially the higher end models, offer very similar luxury spec vehicles. Aston Martin with the Rapide as well, for usually less money, sometimes even half the price or less. So the difference between those marks of vehicle isn't as drastic anymore as it used to be. Now, the Cadillac doesn't necessarily try to re-establish that massive gap in the market between normal cars, or what you term normal cars, and ultimate luxury cars. Rather, it harkens back to the time when cars really were over the top in terms of luxury, especially American luxury cars. Back in the day, say the 30s or 40s, American luxury cars were incredible to look at. They absolutely dominated any scene in which they were in. They had presence. They were the kind of car that you would want to pull up to an event in. And in many ways, the 16 is actually a highly appropriate car for Cadillac to make, rather than any other manufacturer. And one of the reasons for that is not only because Cadillac did make a car back then called the 16, which was also a luxury car, but more importantly because Cadillac, with the original 16, was interestingly the first manufacturer to produce a mainstream V16 engine car, which is very interesting. Now, Cadillac is known for a number of things, including their motorsports achievements, but they are primarily known as a luxury company. And the 16 is all about that. But whereas many marques such as Rolls-Royce and Bentley attempt to have a relatively modern feel to them, with up-to-date tech, fancy style, and in many cases influence from art houses and things like that, specialist designers like Zagato, Pininfarina, etc. The Cadillac 16 doesn't do any of that. It just lives up to Cadillac's design style and does things in really a relatively simple way. It's a very flashy car, it's a very big car, it weighs well over 2 tons, it's around 20 feet long, 7 feet wide, and it says, or has, as I said before, 1,000 horsepower. So you'd expect it to dominate any scene in which it's in, but the way it delivers its performance, and if you actually consider the design of the car and really study the detail, it's actually surprisingly understated. But in a good way. It manages to be almost ridiculously big, but not offensive in the way that something like a Hummer would generally be considered to be, or a Maybach, because it is cheesy and it is glitzy and glamorous in the kind of Hollywood way that you'd expect from a Cadillac, but at the same time it's not offensive. It's a classy looking car, and it's a quintessentially American looking car. It has American style. It looks very gangster. It has, for want of a better word, swag, but real swag, not pants hanging down around your knees swag, but true swag from the days when cars had white wall tyres and low cut window lines. True class and style. That's in my opinion at least. Now, if the 16 were featured on the game, I would expect it to probably have a price tag of around, say, 3 million credits, because at the end of the day it's a concept car, and the concept cars on the game are typically quite expensive, but not many of them are on the same performance level or spec level as the Cadillac. So I would expect it to be pretty expensive, especially considering that it would potentially be the ultimate super saloon in the game, and also pretty much the only car of its type in the game, because we currently have no Rolls-Royces, no Maybachs, no luxury Bentleys, no Phaeton, no high-end luxury BMWs or Mercedes models. So we're pretty barren currently on GranTurismo. We don't have those big ultimate luxury cars. So the Cadillac would completely dominate that market on GranTurismo. And also, despite the fact that it is a relatively extreme or oddball vehicle in its own way, it's not that difficult a vehicle for them to map into the game. It's not obscure. It's located in a museum in America, so it's not hard to find the car. And in the way that it delivers its performance and the way it works, it's not really that radically different. Sure, it has a big, powerful engine, but it's still just a normal, big, powerful engine. It's not some futuristic, crazy machine. It's a car, in the traditional sense. The fact that it can turn off some of its cylinders is nice and all, but at the end of the day, it's a big, luxury car. So it wouldn't be too difficult for them to map it into the game, and it could potentially have incredible tuning potential, especially with the weight loss package and the potential to upgrade that mighty 13.6 litre engine. As for whether or not it would make it into the game, I would say there is a possible chance. I wouldn't say it's likely, but definitely possible. It's not too extreme or too obscure a car to actually get into GranTurismo, and I would certainly love to see it on there. So as always, put down below what cars you think will make it in, what cars you'd like to see, what cars maybe not. But overall, that's it for this week's pick. I'll see you guys next time, and as always, Thanks for watching.